Who is the next generation of the Democratic Party? Semafor is reporting that at least a half dozen senators are now viewed as potential 2028 candidates by their colleagues and top Democrats on Capitol Hill. It's a lot of folks. Semafor is calling it a potential presidential primary dogpile in 2028. Joining us now, Phil Bump and Peter Baker, who are still with us. All right, so Phil, let's talk about the field and what the field might need to consider. You've got some polling on what costs the Democrats in 2024. Lay it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you framed it as being the next generation, I think is really important. One of the things that we saw in 2024 is we saw this decline in support for the Democratic candidate among younger voters in particular. Part of that, I think, is just that younger voters don't recognize the exception that Donald Trump is within our political system. But part of it is just that the Democrats have actually lost ground, particularly among young men and particularly young men of color. We've also seen polling that suggests that there's been sort of some reversion, that some of that support for Trump has probably been fallen back over the course of the first couple months of his presidency. So we're sort of in uncertain territory. But the Democratic Party has for a long time now been more subject to the whims of young people because young people are more likely to vote for Democrats than they are for Republicans. And so the Democratic Party has to be very attentive to this. And so I think that a candidate who's able to effectively argue to young people that they are the vision, that they are the way forward for the country, I think that person's probably going to have more luck as a general election candidate. The question, of course, is, are those young people going to vote in the primary and therefore help get that person on the ticket in the first place?
So I think that's a really good point that you made at the top, which is that for younger voters, Donald Trump is not an anomaly. He's not a disruptor of the status quo. He is the status quo. Donald Trump-style politics is what they've always known. And understanding that and then reacting to the world that we live in today, not the world that we lived in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is important. And what you have in the Democratic Party right now, Peter, is a generation that harkens back to a very different political climate. And there have been arguments out there made and criticisms that Democratic leadership are playing by old rules that no longer apply. Peter, you're on mute.
All right. Sorry. In some ways, they are obviously playing by old rules. And it hasn't been successful for them, you can argue, because they've now lost the presidency twice to Donald Trump, once with the popular vote. And, there's an argument to be said that they need to go out there and find ways of fighting in a way that don't seem quite so decorous. That's what you hear from a lot of people who are in the party, particularly younger leaders, saying that the older members of the party who think that politics was played the way it was in the 80s or 70s or 90s, the Biden generation, that's long past. At the same time, of course, there are Democrats who will tell you you need to make a contrast. They're simply becoming a leftist version of Trump doesn't stand on principle. You need to stand for something better than just we have an ideology that's just different than his. That if you are arguing that he is a threat to democracy, if you're arguing that he represents a corrosive and divisive kind of politics, then simply being corrosive and divisive from the other side, changes the argument. So the Democrats haven't figured that out yet, and they don't have an obvious leader right now. These are a number of accomplished people who are making their way up to the foreground, but it's hard to see which of them at this point is going to emerge from that group in the way that Barack Obama did in 2008 as representative of a new generation.
Yeah, let's bring in somebody from the party, former New York Congressman and former DOJ staffer, Mondaire Jones. Mondaire, it's good to have you. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
The new generation of the Democratic Party, the next generation of the Democratic Party, what do they need to keep in mind?
Well, what they need to keep in mind is that we've got a whole election coming up in 2026 that is of existential importance, especially if people want to do something to rein in the excesses and the illegalities and the corruption of this current presidential administration. So we have to keep our eyes on the prize when it comes to that. And then, of course, if we're fortunate enough in this country to still have free and fair elections, a 2028 presidential election will take place. I don't think that, the so-called Biden cover-up is going to be prominent in 2028. I think there are going to be a lot of things on the minds of voters, but it is important, of course, for people to be honest about what happened in 2024.
Well, let's leave Biden out of it for a second and just focus on messaging. There's a debate within the Democratic Party whether they should lean more progressive. And there's polling numbers out today suggesting that the face of the Democratic Party by far is AOC. obviously on the progressive bent, or if they should go back and hew toward more of a middle ground. I wonder where, you've run elections, you've won elections. Yeah. Where do you stand on where the future is, what the path is?
Well, I think, first of all, that the reason AOC is so popular compared to many other figures in the Democratic Party is not because people view her to be progressive, so to speak. It's because they see her standing up to Elon Musk and Donald Trump at a time when people, not just Democrats, but independents and some disaffected Republicans alike, are saying, who the hell is going to at least try to stop these people from doing what they've been doing when it comes to tanking the economy, taking away fundamental freedoms, and so on and so forth? And you see her when she's out there talking about a message that sounds in economic populism. She's not out here using the word progressive, frankly. And a lot of members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus haven't been using that word very recently either.
So it's an ugly word now?
Look, I think it's a word, sadly, that has been co-opted by some of the more extreme members. Many of them don't even identify as Democrats and the far left of American politics. But what everyone can get behind is the fact that we need an economy that works for everyone. That is a bold economic agenda. So if Bernie Sanders and AOC are out there talking about it the way, Chris Deluzio in Pennsylvania and other moderates are, then that's a good thing. And that's unifying for the party.